Deuteronomy 28 and 43, talking about this particular curse here. I spent some time in the PD area of South Carolina last week, and I'll be there for the next couple of weeks on and off. There's a small town going out I-20 right outside of Florence, which is about an hour and a half away from the beach in traffic. So it's kind of close to the coast. But anyway, just kind of give you some geographical point of reference. The name of this little town is Timminsville. Now, it's 77% Hebrew. When I say Hebrew, I'm talking about so-called black people, okay? Grow up, all right? Grow up. The Hebrews, the people who you call Jews, who are imposters in the earth today, those aren't Hebrew people. Those aren't Israelites. And those aren't Jews. They're not Judah, okay? Those are Idumeans. Those are Romans, and even their own scholars and their own encyclopedias say as much, okay? The town of Timminsville is very small, and almost 80% Hebrew, okay? Now, it's interesting because, I like, when I go to different places, I like to do a little bit of research on where I am, and it's interesting. You know, the top two producers in Timminsville are, in terms of small businesses, one of them is an Elamite gas station owner, and the other is a so-called Vietnamese, or not Vietnamese, a so-called Chinese Moab restaurant owner. On Main Street in Timminsville, South Carolina, Hebrews own nothing. Now, there's not much to it. All right, I think there's a little small. Well, I don't think there's a tiny barber shop and a tiny beauty salon owned by a couple of Hebrew people, all right? So-called black person. Other than that, the people who are making money in that town are Edom, Moab, and Elam, all right? And that is another indicator, if you will. That is another way to know who these prophecies are talking about, who these curses apply to in the earth today. Okay? Because I'm going to read that one particular curse, but I thought it was interesting. And I even asked that Elamite gas station, I'm not going to buy gas from that guy, because I talked to him and he had a wicked spirit on him. I asked him, I said, don't you think, this is what I asked the guy. I said, don't you think it's interesting that your people can come over here and open up gas stations right in a Hebrew area, and you're making money hand over fist, and they don't have anything? And I said, and they've been over here for almost 500 years. Don't you think that's a little weird? And he said, well, you know what he said? His exact words, and I'll never forget when he said this. His exact words were, that's their problem. That's what that proud, filthy Elamite who sells liquor and cigarettes and lottery tickets to disenfranchised so-called black people. That was his response to me. Okay? The curses can only fit a so-called black person in the earth. And I understand, and I'm all too familiar with the truth that it's not based primarily on color, because there are people scattered in the four corners of the earth that can trace their line back to Israel who don't look like black people. Okay? I got that. At the end of the day, you got to test the spirit. This was a filthy Elamite. And you know what? There are two so-called black people in there, and they heard me talking to them. One of them was shaking his head. And he knew. He knew what time it was, so to speak. All right? Deuteronomy 28 and 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Okay? These strangers in Timminsville, South Carolina, and all over America and all over the earth, they're up above Jacob. They own that gas station. And he was bragging about how much money he made. Okay? He's making money hand over fist and laughing all the way to the bank. That Chinese restaurant, Nothing but, I mean, yeah, you have other nationalities coming in there. I'm not saying they're predominantly Hebrew, but most of them are. They're coming in there to get that pork fried rice and all that pork, okay, and dogs and cats. All right, they're above Jacob. It's systematic. It's a system. The system is set up to where the other nations are above it, and that's Bible prophecy. Okay, that's Bible prophecy. You say, well, what about all the so-called African American basketball players and rappers? The so-called Jews prop some of those people up, okay, as tokens, and those people are wicked. The majority of those of rap artists, especially gangster rap, they're wicked as hell. They're leading their people into the lake of fire, okay? And they're puppets for Baphomet. They're puppets for their Edomite Jewish handlers who are laughing at them, okay? Those guys in the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball, they're making money hand over fist for their Jewish masters, okay? And that's the way it is, all right? Because let me tell you something. Once those guys are done, their bodies are broken down, especially football players, right? Their bodies are broken down, and they just go on into the sunset, all right? The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, thou shalt be the tail. All right. So that's it on that one. Now, let's go into probably one of the more famous curses, and a lot of mention is made of this one. And now, I've asked people to show me. I've asked people to show me a record online, in different forums and different chats. I've asked people who prop up Europeans as Jews. I've asked them to produce a document, to produce a record, a book, a record, evidence of them ever being carried away on cargo slave ships. Okay? In their history, where has their people ever been en masse carried away in cargo slave ships not to be redeemed, serving their enemies in a land they didn't know about? And you know what? I get crickets, because nobody can show me that. Because you know why? Because it didn't happen to another group of people in history. You can't show it to me. However, I can show you, okay, plenty of historical evidence, archaeological evidence, scientific evidence, documentation, record after record, most importantly, the Holy Scriptures, preserved in the King James Bible, preserved finally in 1611. Every other Bible is a false Jesuit fraud, okay, brought to you by the Jews and their biblical destruction group formed in 1776. I can show you where a group of people were dragged across the ocean in the Bible, okay? And it was a curse. Being drugged from your home to another land is a curse against your will. All right? Chattel slavery. All right? This particular passage I'm about to read does not apply to Idumeans and Edomites who were posing as the children of Israel today. It doesn't. And even if the Holocaust of the 1940s was real, which it wasn't, it still doesn't even come close to the magnitude of a transatlantic slave trade where conservative estimates over 100 million people were brought to the New World on slave ships. Okay? Conservative. The passage I'm about to read can only apply to one people group in the earth today. Period. And you can try all you want to, and you can use crafty arguments. All right, you can take your Jesuit rulers and their information and try to pass it on as truth, but it doesn't work because you can't produce any record. All right? We can show you. I live in America for any of you watching abroad. All right? I live in the state where I live in South Carolina. This is the state that seceded from the Union in the 1860s. It took place in Charleston, South Carolina, about an hour and 15 minutes south of us. Okay, I've been to the slave markets in Charleston. All right? The slave markets in New York City. No man redeemed them. I'm getting ready to read it out of the Bible. You say you're making a big deal out of it. I'm making a big deal out of it. Yes, I am. These are the kinds of truths that the whore pastors in the churches on Sunday aren't going to expound upon. They're not going to expound upon these. Oh, that's not important anymore. That was in the past. Oh, well, we're all in Christ now. We're all one in Christ. You know, we don't even need to worry about that anymore. And the same people who say those kinds of things are also the people who are looking at Israel today and calling those people, those land grabbers, the children of the Most High. Let's read it. That's a long build-up. But let's read it. Deuteronomy, I'm going to start in 28 and 66. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee. And thou shalt fear day and night. Shalt have none assurance of thy life in the morning. Thou shalt say, would to God it were even. And at even thou shalt say, would to God it were morning. For the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. And here it is. Verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. And that word buy means to redeem. Okay? No man was going to save them. Okay? That was fulfilled 400 years ago, thereabouts. Okay? 400 years ago, that happened. That came to pass. There's no ancient record. There's no record in the Bible of this happening where ancient Israelites went back into Egypt again on ships. Because during Bible times, the landmass of Egypt and Israel was one. They wouldn't have had to use ships to go back into Egypt. Okay? This is spiritual Egypt that they were brought to. This was Egypt in rebirth. This is a place of hardcore bondage. That's what Egypt means in the scriptures. I'll read that here in a little while. Okay? Were brought into Egypt again with ships. Get it? Now I'm talking to you, but I'm also talking to people who are going to watch this and say, well, that's not talking about the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? Those are the people that are working for their father, the devil. And they're doing the work of their father, the devil. They're of their father, the devil. Period. Okay? Now, they were sold as bondmen and bondwomen, and nobody redeemed them. They were put, like I said, the slave markets in Charleston. They were put up on the blocks. They were sold, and nobody redeemed them. They were sold into slavery. And by the way, the so-called Jews were heavy into the slave trade. I mean, I've taught that before, and I've mentioned that before, and I've read articles before. The big ship owners, they were Jews. They were so-called Jews. Edom. That's who they were. They were big in the transatlantic slave trade. They owned, just like it is today. They owned all the banks and lending institutions, just like they do to this day. All right, that curse in Deuteronomy 28 and 68 doesn't apply to any other people on the planet. It never happened to the so-called Chinese. It never happened to the so-called Japanese. It never happened to the so-called Europeans. It never happened to the so-called Hamites. It never happened. It just didn't. It didn't. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to cover that was just two two curses that I wanted to go over this morning. But, obviously we can go through that whole book, and a lot of this has been kind of review time, but it still needs to be preached. It's going to continue to be preached as long as I have breath in my lungs. And the agents out there on the comment boards and all you heretics, keep on coming. You're just condemning yourself. Every time you type something out, and this is directed at obviously, I'll look at you guys. Keep typing all your comments out and keep condemning yourselves, okay? Because by thy words art thou justified, and by thy words art thou condemned. And you guys, every time you type something up that talks about how Israelites are so-called white people, and Israelites are European, and Israelites are, you're condemning yourself, and you're going to be destroyed through the Spirit every time. The time is coming where all this confusion and all this madness is going to be put to a grinding halt, literally. That time is very near upon us, okay? Very near upon us.